Hello, chess friends. So, this is National Master Kevin Yang here, and this is my first video. And in this first video, I think it's best to start out with the basics, right? So, if you're new to chess, usually you want to know what is the point of playing a game. So, you come in playing the game knowing some sort of interest. So, in this case, I think the easiest way to go is what do you do? Or how do you win from this starting position? Well, here's the thing. The goal is checkmate. I mean, you could probably search that on Google, but you might not know what it means, right? So checkmate is mating the king, mating someone's king, or in simpler terms, you're trapping the opponent's king, this piece, this one, and this one, right? So you're trying, if you're on the black side, you want to trap this guy. If you're on the white side, you want to trap this guy. So how do you do that, right? So let's say, let's make a few moves. Pawn, pawn, here, 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 and here. Well, this you think would be trapping the king, but he has an escape square with this check, right? So, okay. So let's look, right? So it's like this, and say he cuts it off. Then this would be the demonstration of trapping the king, right? So in this case, the king does not have anywhere to move. And that is how one person wins the game, right? So it's not going to be easy. Nobody's going to directly fall for this checkmate. So in general, there are many things to do, right? You obviously want, in order to trap this important king, you want to get all your pieces out so that they can try to come together and fight, right? As they say, it's like a team is better than one. There is no I in team, right? So it's all about cooperation here. You want the knight, the bishop, the queen, the rooks. You want all of them to have some sort of role, right? So I think for now, let's cover how to start, right? You look at your pieces, each piece moves differently. So pawns move forwards like this. You can't move backwards, right? So now this chess is a turn-based game. So one person of a color makes the move, and then the opposing color makes a move. So by each turn, you make a move, your opponent makes a move. It's sort of like you're seeing what he's doing, and he's seeing what you're doing. So in this case, I mean, let's look at how the rook moves, right? So the rook, it's kind of like a lawnmower, goes only up and to the right, up and to the right, right? So let's make sure that these pieces cannot really hop over any of the other pieces, only except for the knights, but I'll explain that when I get to the knights. So let's look at this. If, let's say, white moves the pawn up one square, and black moves the pawn up one square, now the rook is no longer allowed to move here because it can't hop over this guy. So that's important to know when dealing with rooks. is that there's a restricting movement in order to let the rook move. So think about it this way. The rooks are most efficient when they have more space to roam. They have open files, for example, or there are files all the way down and all the way down and this way and that. So if all these are open for the rooks, then that rook would have a lot of power. Okay? So let's see. Let's go back to this position. Now that we know that both these rooks, they move the same way, right? We also have the knight now. Now, how does the knight move? Okay, I mean, you've probably heard this if you're into chess, but knights move in L's. So, this way, right? This way. So, it's kind of creating that letter, you know? Like, you're making a right turn, you're making a left turn, but okay. Let's say the pawn moves up, the pawn moves up. Now you can make a right turn this, left turn that way, right? So you're kind of, without stopping at the stop sign, you're making the turn already. So just imagine that, like if you're a driver, right? You're just making the turn without really stopping, making the turn without really stopping, or this way, just making the turn, right? So what they say is every piece is best when there's a lot of space, when the knight is able to move a lot of squares. So, okay, let's look at this. This, bam, this, this, this. And then let's say um, this, this. Okay, so let's do a demonstration, right? Now this knight can move here, he can move here, he can move here, he can move here, he can move here, 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 here. Now, it's kind of like a shape. And let's think about this. One side, two side, three side, four side. Let's just pretend that it's like an octagon, right? Kind of makes an octagon if you get the diagonals together, right? So just think about it, that if the knight's in the center, there's more room to go to. But I'm not saying that all these moves are good, but I'm saying that the knight has opportunities, right? So now that we know how the knight moves, let's see how these bishop moves. Okay, notice how this bishop came from this square. It goes diagonally, right? It goes diagonally this way, it goes diagonally this way. So that's how the bishops move. They move with freedom all the way down and then all the way this, but they can't hop over pawns, right? So, for example, this bishop cannot move here right now to this square because the pawn is blocking the bishop. So, let's see, in order for that to happen, and then let's say the knight moves up in an L shape, remember what we discussed? Making the turn without stopping, right? So now this bishop can move here because now the pawn has moved and now he can move here, right? So, okay, so that's pretty much a description of the bishop. Can't move over pieces, but let's look at it this way. Let's start from the start, right? Look back at knights. Knights can move like this. They can violate jumping over pawns, but that's because they're knights. They move in L's. They don't move in diagonals. It doesn't happen that way. They move in L's, right? So they can't reach this square, but they can reach the one next to it. This one, this one. So, okay. Now let's look at the queen. Now the queen is interesting because it's the most powerful piece in the game other than the king. The king is the one that you want it to survive, right? You want to keep it sheltered, you want it to survive. So let's look at this. Let's demonstrate the power of the queen, right? So queen, pawn, queen, pawn, queen, and then pawn, pawn, right? So now, in this position, even if it's black's turn to move, right? This queen is really powerful because it can go this way, this way, this way, this way. It can go in all the directions. But the thing is that just like all these other pieces, it can't hop over any pawns, right? So the queen can't go over there. The queen can only try to capture this pawn, right? So the queen is powerful, but not necessarily like any other piece because it functions differently. Okay, so let's go all the way back. Now, let's look at how the captures work, because I've been talking about captures, and let's simulate it a little more directly. So we have, let's say this pawn moves up, and this pawn moves up. So pawn captures happen diagonally. Diagonally means this way, and if there is a pawn, like for example, this, now he can go this way too, right? So it's very interesting because this pawn has many options, right? You go this way, or you can go this way. So those are the options you could consider when making those moves, right? And so that's one of those decisions sometimes you have to make. You have to either consider capturing this pawn, moving, or just sitting there, right? You could add a reinforcement. You could get these guys out. You could get one of these knights out, maybe activate the rooks, right? So all these other possibilities are possible. That's what makes chess so hard, is that there's so much to consider, so much food for thought. So it's usually, it gets easier as you play more and more games. So to get good at this, it's not a matter of intuition or instinct, but it's more of this practice and that you're passionate about it. So, okay. So let's talk about how we want to open the game. So we talked about checkmate, right? Let's look at this again. And then, so this would be checkmate, right? So we want to trap the king. So that's the goal, but we don't want to always do it like this. I mean, there's better ways to do it, like this, this, get the pieces out, right? And then let's let's say black keeps falling with the pawns, and then this, this, and this, right? There's also this checkmate. So people might not be so dumb, but I'm just saying that checkmate is trapping the king, essentially, so that it has no squares to move to. Like, you can't capture your own piece, right? Okay, so that brings us to another point with kings. With kings, they move one square at a time, or, okay, let's look at this. Knight, knight. And now, the king can go this way, and this way, one square at a time, usually. But at the start of the game, there's a feature called castling. And castling is when you do the switcheroo. Now, the switcheroo can happen for both the king's position on this side, or it can happen on the queen's side, right? So, let's look at this. Pawn, pawn, knight, bishop comes out, bishop comes out. Black decides to castle. Get the queen out, knight, and white decides to castle this way, right? So now you see that in this case, both this castling and this castling are both logical moves. They both exist in the position. And as a chess player, you want to find out which one is better and try to evaluate it, right? You have so many options to think about again. Like, it's not just about these castlings. It's about whether you want to push this pawn, or whether you want to push this pawn, or maybe getting the knight over. There's so many options you want to consider. So it's kind of like a judgment game. The guy with the best judgment, or the girl with the best judgment, will win. So it's all about this sort of thinking, right? So whoever is best at evaluating whatever their thoughts is and thinking about which move is the best and what is most effective is likely the better chess player. So learning the rules is just one part of it, right? Now, in this video, I will just cover how to learn, how to open the game, right? So the opening comes with three basic principles. So number one, we want to get our pieces out, right? So this is the general formation for a person. We want to put our bishops here, targeting there, having the space enough to go this way, but also, just like this bishop, we also want our knights to go here, right? And our knights to go here. So this brings us, other than the development of these guys, this brings us to our second point. And the second point is we want to focus on the center, because clearly everything is going to start with tensions at the center, right? So at the center, it's where all the action begins. It's where likely one person is going to try to control the central squares in order to keep their opponent on guard, right? So that's usually the second starting tip, is to control the center. You want to get these key escape squares. You want to control these squares so that you prevent your opponent from doing so. But okay, let's look at a very principled line. So this is what we call a French, right? So everybody's controlling the center, right? And so let's look. The bishop's here, knight's here, everything's castled, and then this, right? Okay, so in this formation, you can notice that our positions are exactly symmetrical, right? So everyone's in the same spot. Black and white are both in the same spot. The bishop's like this. The knights are both pinned. I'll tell you what that means later. But basically that everyone is in a good shape because we've developed everything, right? And now we want to figure out how to develop the queen, maybe to here, the rooks, maybe after you clear them like this. Maybe you want to get your rook here, right? Or you can push the pawns, get the queen out, and get the rook here, right? And then something like this, right? So this is like the structure, right? Everyone is still focusing on the center, even without tensions and with tensions, right? And we're focusing on how to get everything out of its original position. So let's take a look at this position and how all the pieces are out of their original spots compared to this one, right? You see, it's all cluttered in the back rank, and now it all came out. Not in this fashion, but in this fashion. So, like this fashion. So, they all come out one by one. And okay, so we'll leave the middle game for next video, but so yeah, so this brings us to, okay, so now we know that everything's, that we're trying to develop our pieces, right? We got this knight out here, bishop out, and another aspect of opening the game is you want a castle. You want to keep your king safe. So that's another important tip. And so opening the game, you can open however you want. You can open with this pawn, right? You could open with the knight. You can open however you want. But I would suggest that if you went and you really wanted to play something specific, you can start by looking at the Encyclopedia of Chess Openings on Wikipedia, or another great resource is on chess.com with the Learn and Openings tab. Just search for something you want and know how to start it. So I hope this was helpful, and hopefully you learned how to start the game. Thank you.